The dust storm had been following Clara May Hutchinson for 3 straight days, like a ghost that refused to let her rest. She rode through the Wyoming territory, her shawl pulled tight against the biting October wind. When the sign for Rawhide Pass appeared through the yellow haze, it felt less like salvation and more like the end of the line. The town sat hunched between jagged hills, a scatter of weathered buildings clinging to the earth as if too stubborn to be blown away. Her horse, a tired old mare with ribs showing, stumbled as she dismounted outside Mrs. Garrett's boarding house. Clara's hands shook as she tied the reins, not from cold, but from memory. The memory of a saloon floor slick with her husband's blood, of the last words he'd ever spat at her before the knife went in. 3 weeks had passed since that night, but she could still smell the whiskey, still hear the dull thud when Jake Hutchinson hit the ground. The door creaked as she entered. Mrs. Garrett appeared from behind the counter, gray hair pulled so tight it lifted her brows, sharp eyes narrowing. "Clara May Hutchinson," she said, not asking, just knowing. "Heard about Jake. Can't say I'm surprised." Clara swallowed hard. "I need work." "Can you tend wounds?" the woman interrupted, watching her closely. "There's a man up in the hills. Got himself shot up pretty bad. Needs someone to nurse him." Clara hesitated. "How bad?" Quote, "Bad enough he's paying $20 for a week's care. That's more than you'll earn scrubbing linens in a month." Mrs. Garrett's tone softened slightly. "Course, he's difficult. Lives alone, out past Devil's Canyon. Folks say he's not right in the head since whatever happened out there. $20. Enough to get her to Denver, maybe farther. Far enough from ghosts." "I'll take it," Clara said. Mrs. Garrett nodded. "His name's Elias Kane. You'll find him up the old mining road. When you see 3 lightning-struck pines, turn north. His cabin's a mile from there. Only thing standing between here and hell." By afternoon, Clara was in the saddle again, her meager coins spent on hardtack, beans, and bandages from the general store. Samuel, the shopkeeper, had given her a look halfway between pity and warning when she'd mentioned Kane's name. "You sure about this, Mrs. Hutchinson?" he'd asked. "Kane ain't like regular folk. Came here 2 winters ago half dead, looking like he'd wrestled the devil himself. Keeps to the high country. Last woman who went up there, she came back in 2 days. Wouldn't say why." Clara had met his gaze steadily. "Everyone has demons, Mr. Samuel. Some just wear them on the outside." The climb into the hills was brutal. The red rock rose like broken teeth against the sky, and the wind carried the faint cry of coyotes from somewhere deep in the canyon. She found the 3 dead pines just as the sun bled out behind the peaks. When the trail turned north, the air grew colder, heavier. Finally, through the dusk, she saw it, a cabin crouched at the edge of the woods, built from rough-hewn logs and shadow. No smoke from the chimney, no sound but the wind. For a moment, Clara wondered if he'd already died. Then, the door opened. The man who filled the frame looked carved from the same timber as his cabin, tall and lean, with dark hair unkempt around a face made of sharp lines and storm-gray eyes that seemed to look straight through her. His left arm was wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. "You the woman from town?" His voice was rough like gravel dragged across stone. "Yes, Mrs. Garrett sent me." He studied her a long moment. The silence stretched until she thought he'd turn her away. Then, finally, "Come in before the cold kills us both." The inside smelled of smoke and old blood. A single room, bare except for a bed, a table, and a cold fireplace. The blankets were stained dark where he'd bled through them. Kane moved stiffly, lowering himself into a chair with a grunt of pain. Clara saw the feverish sweat on his brow, the set of his jaw as he tried to hide it. "When were you shot?" she asked, setting her bag on the table. 4, maybe 5 days ago. Lost track." "Who did it?" Quote. He met her eyes. "Don't ask questions. Just do your job." She didn't argue. She'd learned long ago when a man didn't want to talk. Instead, she unwrapped his bandages, careful but firm. The wound was ugly, angry red, swollen and oozing. But what made her breath catch weren't the new injuries. It was the old ones. His chest and arms were a map of scars, knife wounds, burns, lashes, a history written in flesh. "I'll need to clean it," she said softly. "Water and whiskey if you have them." Cabinet above the stove. Barrel out back. As she worked, she felt his gaze on her, not hungry or cruel like Jake's had been, but wary, like a wild animal watching to see if she meant to hurt it. "There are rules," he said suddenly. "You stay a week, no more. You don't ask about before. You don't go through my things. You do your work, take your pay, and leave." "Understood." "Understood," Clara replied, though she wondered what kind of past needed walls that thick. The fire crackled to life as she poured boiling water into a basin. When she pressed the cloth to his shoulder, Kane didn't so much as flinch. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Just do it." She did, cut the bandages away, poured whiskey over the wound, and probed for the bullet. He gritted his teeth, knuckles white against the table, but made no sound. When the knife finally scraped metal, Clara exhaled in relief. "Got it." Kane sagged forward, pale and sweating. She worked quickly, packing the wound with clean cloth and wrapping it tight. "You'll need stitches tomorrow." He nodded faintly. "Bandage is enough for now." When she finished, she turned to find his eyes on her again, gray and unreadable. "There's a cot in the corner," he said finally. "You can sleep there." Clara hesitated. "And you?" "I'll manage." He rose, moving with the careful grace of a man who'd lived with pain a long time. As the wind howled outside, she lay awake listening to the creak of the cabin and the slow rhythm of his breathing. The smell of smoke and blood filled the air. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled, and the sound sent a chill through her, because something in that cry reminded her of the look in Elias Kane's eyes, wild, wounded, and utterly alone. And as Clara drifted into uneasy sleep, one thought wouldn't leave her. $20 might not be enough for whatever darkness lived in this cabin. The first 3 days tested Clara's resolve harder than any winter she'd survived on the plains. Elias Kane's cabin was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, and both leaked when it rained. The stove smoked, the water barrel froze each night, and the floorboards creaked like bones beneath her boots. But it was Kane himself who proved the hardest test of all. He spoke little, answering questions with grunts or one-word replies. During the day, he sat by the window with his rifle across his lap, watching the trail below like a man expecting ghosts to ride out of the canyon. At night, he paced the small cabin, restless even with fever. Clara tried to sleep through the sound of his boots scraping the floor, but more than once, she woke to the sharp cry of his nightmares. The second night, she found him thrashing, sweat pouring down his face, his lips forming words half-choked with guilt. "Samuel, no." "God, Samuel, I'm sorry." He jolted awake, eyes wild, hand going straight for the knife beside his bed. "It's me," Clara said softly, keeping her distance. "You were dreaming." For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her. Then his shoulders sagged, shame replacing the fury in his eyes. "Go back to sleep, Mrs. Hutchinson." But Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the dying fire and listened to the broken sound of his breathing. Whoever Samuel was, his ghost still had claws in Elias Kane. By the 4th morning, the wound looked cleaner, the swelling gone down. Kane barely reacted when she changed the bandages now, though she noticed how he tensed each time her fingers brushed his skin. It wasn't modesty. It was habit, like a man who'd learned that every touch might bring pain. That afternoon, the cabin filled with smoke when the stove refused to draw. Clara coughed, waving at the haze, until a shadow loomed behind her. Without a word, Kane reached past her, adjusted the damper with his good hand, and the smoke cleared instantly. "Like this," he said. "You have to set it just so." Quote, it was the most words he'd said in 3 days. Clara turned to thank him and found herself inches from him, close enough to smell the mix of smoke, pine, and leather on his skin. Her heart stumbled. "Thank you," she managed. He stepped back quickly, eyes unreadable. "You're cooking the beans wrong." Her brows lifted. "Excuse me?" They need to soak overnight first. You'll ruin them that way. Clara bristled. I've been cooking beans since before you grew half those scars, Mr. Kane. The stores you left me are spoiled. I'm making do. He blinked, startled by her tone, then said quietly, Then you should've. He stopped, the muscle in his jaw tightening. Never mind. No, go on, she said, temper flaring. Should've what? Magically fixed your stove? Pulled fresh pork out of thin air? A strange look crossed his face. Part surprise, part respect. You've got fight in you, he said finally. I'm not afraid of you, she replied, though her heart was racing. That night, the temperature dropped hard. Clara woke shivering, her thin blanket no match for the mountain cold. The fire had died down, and from across the room she heard Kane's restless turning. She rose quietly to throw more wood on the embers, and saw him uncovered, the blanket twisted on the floor. Moonlight streamed through the window, silvering his skin, tracing the map of scars across his chest. She didn't mean to stare, didn't mean to reach out, but something about that mix of strength and ruin drew her hand before she could stop it. The moment her fingers brushed the old burned scar along his ribs, he caught her wrist in an iron grip. His voice was low and dangerous. Don't. I'm sorry, she whispered. Your blanket was off. I only meant to. He didn't let go. In the dim light, she saw the storm in his eyes. Fear, shame, pain, all tangled together. Why would you touch me? The question cut deep. Clara swallowed hard. Because everyone deserves gentleness, she said softly, even those who've forgotten what it feels like. He released her as if burned. Go back to bed, Mrs. Hutchinson. Quote. She obeyed, but when she woke the next morning, she found his thick wool blanket folded neatly at the foot of her cot. From then on, something shifted. Kane still watched the trail like a man guarding a secret, but the silence between them softened. He began teaching her small things, how to fix the stove, how to check the traps near the stream, how to spot storm signs in the clouds. On the 5th day, he handed her a rifle. I don't need that, she said. Yes, you do, he replied. A woman alone out here should know how to shoot. I'm not alone, Clara pointed out. He gave a faint, crooked smile. Won't always be true. He showed her how to hold the rifle, how to breathe steady. His hand covered hers, guiding the barrel. The contact sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. Breathe, he said, voice low near her ear. Half out, then squeeze. The rifle cracked, the shot going wide. She groaned in frustration. You flinched, he said simply. Because it's loud. You'll get used to it. By the 6th shot, she hit the tin can square. He nodded once. Natural. They practiced until her shoulder ached and her cheeks flushed with pride. When they returned to the cabin, he favored his arm more than usual. You've overdone it, she said. Sit down, let me check. He started to protest, but she'd already unwrapped the bandage. The wound looked better. Angry but healing. You heal slow, she murmured. Been doing that all my life, he replied. When she finished, he caught her hand. Not rough this time, but gentle. Thank you, he said quietly. It's what I'm paid for. No, he said, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Not just for this. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he let her go, walls snapping back into place. That night, the wolves came closer than ever. Their howls echoed through the canyon, chilling the air. Kane sat near the door with his rifle ready. They won't come in, he said. They're just hungry. Clara shivered near the fire. Does anything ever scare you? Everything, he said after a long pause. Every sound, every stranger. Fear keeps you alive out here. Stop being scared, and you stop being careful. Stop being careful. You die, she finished quietly. He nodded. Something like that. But as she watched him, scarred, haunted, but still fighting, Clara realized it wasn't the wolves that frightened her anymore. It was the thought of leaving when her 7 days were done, because somewhere between tending his wounds and sharing his silence, she'd stopped fearing Elias Kane and started fearing a life without him. The storm came before dawn. Wind howled through the cracks of the cabin, rain pounding the roof like gunfire. Clara woke to find Elias gone from his bed. She threw on her shawl, heart-hammering until she saw him through the window, out in the rain, nailing down a loose board before the wind could tear it free. "Get inside," she called. He turned, hair plastered to his forehead, rain streaming down his face. "Just one more nail." But the hammer slipped, his foot caught the edge, and he fell the last few feet, landing hard in the mud. Clara ran to him, soaked in seconds. When she helped him to his feet, Elias was laughing. Actually laughing. "See?" he said between breaths, graceful as ever. "You'll break your neck one day," Clara scolded. "Wouldn't be the first thing I've broken." They stumbled back inside, dripping and breathless, laughing like fools. For a moment, the cabin didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like home. The laughter faded, replaced by something quieter, something warmer. Their eyes met, and suddenly all the unspoken words between them hung heavy in the air. "You should change before you catch your death," he said softly. "You too," she whispered. She turned behind the blanket she'd hung for privacy, her hands trembling as she changed into her dry dress. She could hear him stoking the fire, hear the faint clink of tin cups. When she stepped out, Elias was sitting at the table, pouring coffee. He looked up, and the look in his eyes stole her breath, like he was seeing her for the first time. "I'm no good for you," he said suddenly. "Then we match," she replied. He stood slowly, closing the space between them. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Quote, when his lips met hers, the world went still. The wind outside, the crackle of the fire, all of it faded until there was only his mouth, his warmth, his heartbeat pressed against hers. The kiss deepened, slow and hungry, like two souls starved for the same thing. When they finally broke apart, both were shaking. "I shouldn't," he said hoarsely. "I can't promise you anything but pain." "Then I'll take it," Clara whispered. "Better your pain than another man's cruelty." He closed his eyes, forehead against hers. "God help me," he murmured. "You're going to ruin me. Maybe I'll fix you instead." They didn't speak after that. The fire burned low as they sat close, sharing warmth and silence. Two broken people finding something like peace in each other's arms. But peace, like all good things in the frontier, was fragile. The next morning, the sound of hooves shattered it. Clara woke to Elias's voice, sharp and urgent. "Get dressed," he ordered, already checking his rifle. "What is it?" Quote, "Riders, 3 of them." He moved to the window, eyes narrowing. "Trouble." Quote. Moments later, a voice called out from beyond the cabin. "Elias Kane! We know you're in there. Just want to talk about what happened down in Cedar Junction." Elias froze, every muscle taut. "Stay back from the window," he told her. Clara peered through a crack in the boards. 3 men on horseback, hard-faced, armed. One held a rifle across his saddle, the kind of man who smiled only before pulling a trigger. "You've got the wrong man," Elias shouted. The leader laughed. "Funny, because Tom Garrett says you're the one who burned his family alive. Says you took what didn't belong to you before the fire." The name hit Clara like a blow. Mrs. Garrett, Tom Garrett, the woman who'd sent her here. "You go to hell," Elias barked. The man chuckled. "We'll meet you halfway. You got 30 minutes before we come in. Be smart, Kane. You ain't walking away from this." Elias turned to Clara. "There's a trail out back. Go now. Follow the creek east. Don't look back." "I'm not leaving you." "Clara, please, I won't have you." She grabbed his arm. "Would you leave me?" Quote. He stared at her, jaw tightening, then cursed softly. "Stubborn woman." Pot calling the kettle black, she shot back, and despite everything, his lips twitched in the ghost of a smile. They moved fast, barricading the door, loading the spare pistol. "Stay low," Elias said. "Aim for their horses if they rush us." The first shot splintered the wall, showering her with wood. Clara flinched but fired back, missing wide. Elias's rifle answered, and one rider toppled. The air filled with smoke and thunder. the smell of gunpowder thick and choking. Then, pain exploded through her shoulder. The pistol dropped from her hand, and she fell. "Clara!" Elias roared, dragging her behind the water barrel. Blood soaked his shirt as he pressed his hand to her wound. "Damn it, you're supposed to stay down!" She tried to smile through the pain. "Kettle, remember?" He almost laughed, then froze. More riders were coming. The leader dismounted, gun trained on them. "Throw down your weapon, Kane, it's over." Elias's hand tightened around hers. "Whatever happens, don't be afraid," he said softly. Then, slowly, he lowered his rifle. The men advanced, then stopped as a new voice cut through the chaos. "Federal Marshal, drop your weapons!" Gunfire erupted again, this time from the ridge. The bounty hunters turned to face the attack, and Elias threw himself over Clara as bullets tore through the air. When it ended, silence fell heavy and sudden. A tall man with a badge knelt beside them. "Miss, you hurt?" "She's shot," Elias said, his voice breaking. The marshal looked between them. "You Elias Kane?" "Yes." "Then you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Garrett." Elias stiffened. Clara tried to rise, but the pain was too much. "He didn't do it!" She gasped. The marshal's expression softened, but his tone stayed firm. "Ma'am, best thing you can do for him is live." As she faded into unconsciousness, she felt Elias's hand in hers, heard his voice, rough and low. "Take care of her." When she woke, she was in a small room behind Rawhide Pass's barber shop. Bandages bound her shoulder, the air thick with carbolic acid. "Where is he?" she rasped. "County jail," said Doc Holsworth. "Trial in a week. I need to see him." "You need rest," the doctor said. "That man's past is catching up. Don't let it drown you, too." But Clara had already made up her mind. 2 days later, pale and still weak, she rode for the county seat. The wind cut through her coat, but she barely felt it. She'd tended his wounds once before. Now she'd fight for the ones he couldn't heal himself. The marshal tried to turn her away, saying Elias didn't want visitors. "He's protecting you," Thorne said. "Then he's a fool," Clara replied. "Because I'm done being protected." She demanded to know the truth. And when she finally stood in front of Elias, behind iron bars, his gray eyes hollow, he tried to send her away again. But she didn't leave. Not this time. She listened as he told her everything. The fire, the girl named Rebecca, the brother who wanted blood, the guilt that had driven him into the wilderness. She listened, then took his scarred hands in hers. "You're not the man who ran," she said quietly. "You're the man who stayed alive long enough to become something better." "Clara, you don't." "I do." In that cold jail cell, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, she kissed him once more through the bars. And somewhere outside, a church bell rang, soft and distant, like a promise of forgiveness waiting to be earned.